take a moment to reflect. Think about your own science connection, your moments of wonder, or who's mentored you, or maybe what roadblocks you actually had to overcome to make your place in science. What is your work, your hobbies, your personal life? What's that joy, that wonder, that inspiration that you take in science, and that has brought you here to this day, and to be able to join us to this conversation, and wherever you are in your careers, in your personal life, we really thank you for being here. And as we at CRS are celebrating our 25 years of working to strengthen science teaching and learning, we know that all of you have been a part of that work and a part of that story. Some of you are brand new and have joined our efforts just in the last year or so, and some of you have been longtime partners in our work for a decade or more. And we really appreciate you sharing, and thank you for sharing in the chat some of your connections. And we are so excited to have you all here today. And I think all of our presenters are here, and you're going to be so excited to hear from those presenters today. So I'm not going to spend much more time talking. I am going to be very excited to turn the program over, but I hope you found those moments of joy. And I really want to quickly just point out, tell you just a tiny story about these pictures. So one of the things we do to encourage elementary teachers and support them in teaching science, which can be really difficult, as you'll hear, is we have a program we call our Science Superstar Challenge. And this year we called it the Champions of Discovery. And we set up just opportunities throughout the year for teachers to document and reflect on the way they're teaching science. And those teachers who accomplish it, who successfully meet the challenge, they get to get some prizes, and they get honored as our Champions of Discovery. And so this year, one of the prizes that we were able to give those teachers when they came to pick up their prizes at our office was we had these great little beanies, these hats that were donated from ADAPT. And you may have seen it if you're a Warriors fan. They've adopted the gold-blooded theme this year, this slogan from this company. And this teacher came and picked up the hats as part of her prize package. And a couple days later, her kids got to go on a field trip, their first back in-person field trip in 2 years. And they went to Muir Beach, and it was a little drizzly, and they were just so excited to be rocking their new Science Champions hats and out there exploring at the beach. And we just thought that was just so much of an encapsulation of the joy of exploring in science that you all helped make possible. So Eric, if we can go to the next slide, I will just very briefly mention our three amazing speakers today. You're going to first hear from Claudio Vargas, who will, of course, introduce himself and share. But I have to tell you, we're so fortunate to have Claudio with us. He is just a renowned educator and a scientist himself. But his sort of role today in our presentation, one of many roles that he's had as a classroom teacher, a district leader, part of the statewide science project. He is also was on the panel of the National Academies of Sciences, which issued this call to action with some very strong recommendations. So we're very excited to have Claudio here to present. We have Jessica Sawko, who is the director of the California STEM Network, and she is the former executive director of the California Science Teachers Association, and she'll be helping us, she'll be sharing with us about what's going on at the state level and STEM networks in the state, funding, a blueprint for action at the state level. And then we're very fortunate to have with us today also Paulette Smith, who's going to give us a little picture of what it's like, a little reality check from the front lines of elementary science education. She is the principal of James Madison Elementary in San Leandro, and is one of the first educators that I got to know when I started in my role as the executive director of Community Resources for Science nearly 13 years ago. And have always been so amazed and impressed and in awe of her work supporting students and teachers wherever she has been a leader in education. So I am going to turn it over to Claudio and thank all of our presenters for sharing today. And so Eric, we can stop sharing and turn that over to Claudio. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. And welcome, everybody. My name is Claudio Vargas, and I am zooming in from Oakland, from the Bay Area. And that's where I worked as an educator for the last 29 years. And well, I'm still doing so. That's where I met Paulette in Oakland Unified School District. where I taught K-5 for about 9 years, bilingual kindergarten and 5th grade. And then I was the science coordinator for the district for a number of years till I retired 3, 4 years ago from the district, not from the work. And I was fortunate to have been invited about 1.5 years ago to work with this committee at the National Academy of Sciences. And we'll get started in right there. All right. So, and the title here is Better, More Equitable Science Education, a National Priority. Now, you were all here for the last 2 years, and you've seen what has happened in our country here in the United States and in the world. And I'll give you a second to read this. And one of the outcomes from our experience in the last 2 years is the realization that science education is really not the national priority it needs to be. And out of this came a call to action sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York that went to the National Academy of Sciences asking for a report and a call to action to change things, to find out what is going on and to make recommendations. And the charge was this, right? In order to advance science education programs from where they are today, we need to provide an argument for the importance of science education across K-16. Even now, 2022, we still have to justify why science is important. And coming from the last 2 years, it became very critical to understand that. To look at the major challenges for implementing a coherent science education program, all the way from, I'd say, TK to 16, and look at different approaches that have worked throughout the nation. And finally, to make recommendations for policymakers, both at the federal level and at the state level. So I'm not going to talk about all of these different components. You will have I'm sure Teresa will put a link to the actual call to action, but I will touch on the important pieces here. Now, the committee was formed by members, educators from across the country, different roles, different responsibilities. And we spent about 5 months meeting in closed sessions virtually, and also had public sessions inviting educational leaders, again, virtually, right? To hear from them, to hear what was going on in their communities, in their states, throughout the country. We also had public input. The National Academy sent out surveys to over 700 people, and we got over 700 responses. The NSTA, the National Science Teachers or Teaching Association, also sent out over 1,000 submissions of ideas, of issues, of challenges and opportunities from their memberships throughout the country. And we took all this information, including all the past publications of the National Academy of Sciences, to put together a picture of what the reality of science education is today and where we want to go from this moment on. And the first question we had to answer is, why science? Why is science so important for our nation, for our world? And again, it's very incredible to me that in 2022, we still have to ask this question and answer this question. At any rate, we came up with 4 main points around why science is important at the national level. And number one is that scientific thinking is essential for everybody, regardless of whether they are going to pursue a career in STEM education or not, because science is a way of thinking. Second, that science is a way of participating in decision-making, of having a voice in society, and that supports a fully functioning democracy. Science helps us make decisions about everything in our lives, because everything has to do, right, with science and technology and math and engineering in our world today. And we have to make decisions based on evidence, not on rumor, not on what we think is right, but on evidence. And science helps us there. Number three is science helps us understand the world and to solve the issues that are confronting our world today. Now, science can't solve every problem, but it definitely can make inroads in solving issues. And it's important to understand that in order to solve the world's diverse problems, we need a diverse STEM community to do so. And finally, it's also crucial for the jobs that exist today and that will exist tomorrow, right? It's a way for our young generation to pursue their dreams and also to make a decent living. We found that STEM jobs pay an average of $50,000 a year more than other jobs. So this is what we proposed, right? This is why science is critical. Now, this is at the national level. Within the educational system, science as a discipline also has a real intrinsic value in terms of language and literacy development. But that's another story for another day. Now, what is our vision for the future for science? One is to have high quality science teaching and learning that is equitable. Two, that we need a diverse and well-prepared teaching workforce. And finally, that students need supportive pathways through science. TK16, even though the focus here is the jump between high school and post-secondary. So this is a vision of the future, but really it's a vision for the present. Now, how far are we from this vision? If we look at elementary science, and if you're in a school system, especially at the elementary level, you understand this, you know this. At the national level, science is taught on average 20 minutes per day, while 90 minutes for ELA, 60 minutes for math. Now in California, the last study that was done, and this was about 6 years ago, it wasn't 20 minutes a day for K2, it was 20 minutes a week of science. And that's the reality that we're living with, that our teachers are living with at the K5 level or TK5. And the reality is that what is assessed is taught. And if science is not assessed till 5th grade, it will not be taught till 5th grade. And the second piece here around elementary teaching is that teachers aren't always able to do their investigations because of lack of materials. And reading and looking at videos is not how we learn science. We need to use the science and engineering practices in order to really learn science. Now, we're, 8 years into the next generation science standards. What's going on with the materials, the instructional materials. Well, the last survey, a recent survey by CASE, by the California Association of Science Educators, reported that out of the 594 responses, over 60% responded that their district had not yet adopted an instructional materials, their instructional materials, for a variety of reasons. One was funding. That the state is not providing funding to the districts, right? So they're in a budget crisis, so they will not buy instructional materials and have teachers come up with whatever they can. By the way, curriculum development is not the purview of teachers. They are the teachers. They teach. The curriculum development is done by professionals that do that 8 hours a day. The second excuse is that the districts are working in the implementation of math or ELA and not adopting science. So it's a matter of priorities. So how about the quality of instruction? Without materials, right, the schools are not able to do hands-on work every week. They're not. So they go on to the reading or the looking at videos, except for the more affluent schools that are able to gather materials, right, and do this. And we also see that, especially at secondary and post-secondary, that most of the teaching is done through presentations, right, where students are listening to instructors. And again, how much learning can happen in that way. So how about access to courses? Again, this is in high school. Many high schools that offer no biology courses, no chemistry courses, and especially no physics courses. And this is in schools where at least 80% of students are Black, Latino, Latina, or Indigenous. Now, if we look at physics courses, for example, 90% of schools that have high percentage of students living in poverty do not offer physics courses. And preparation of teachers, we found that in the last 3 years, only 5% of elementary teachers have received more than 35 hours of science professional learning. Now, most elementary teachers don't come from the science world, and they need this preparation. And this gives them one more reason not to teach science. And in terms of experience, workforce experience, we find that the highest percentage of students of color and students living in poverty are most likely to be taught by inexperienced teachers, first-year teachers, right? Or teachers that are teaching outside their degree, right? And that's the reality, that's the vision. And how about teaching diversity? What's the diversity of our teaching force? There is a mismatch between teachers and students in terms of their race or ethnicity, both nationally and statewide. Nationally, you can see that 80% of the teachers are white, while 46% of the students are white. In California, we see that 55% of students are Latino or Latina, while 22% are teachers that are Latino or Latina. So there's a disparity there. And the question is, does representation in the classroom matters? And it does. Having a diverse teaching workforce connects culture. sets high expectations and reduces implicit bias that we know exists. So attention to equity requires that teachers, that we change the teaching force and that teachers receive culturally and linguistic responsive pedagogy, that I know is a dirty word in other states, but it's critical that all professional learning looks at CLRP to support teachers supporting students. So this is a very quick overview of what is going on. Again, I would really suggest looking at the call, but it'll give you a sense of what is going on nationally, and that we need to make better, more equitable science a national priority. So how do we get there? What do we do? So how do we get there? So the call advances 5 priorities, 3 action areas, and 8 recommendations. I'm not going to go into detail in the 8 recommendations. Again, you can read that, but I'll again touch on the most important parts. Starting with the 5 priorities for local and regional science. First is to provide time, especially in elementary, to schedule science at the same level as ELA and math. It's just as important. And if you're talking about literacy development and language development, science is the content that can provide the context for learning to read, write, listen, and speak, as well as developing language. Second, develop a strong, diverse workforce. And we need to begin to treat teachers as professionals and provide job-embedded opportunities for professional learning. Third, provide supportive pathways for students across grades 6 through 12 and invite rather than weed out at the post-secondary. Fourth, to employ multiple assessments to check for conceptual understanding as well as proficiency with science practices. So using not only state-mandated high-stakes testing, but use formative assessment to inform everyday instruction. And finally, use evidence, right, to identify opportunity gaps, such as lack of resources, lack of access to advanced courses, lack of experienced teachers, and track progress towards addressing these issues. So those are the 5 recommendations put out in the call, or priorities that are addressed by the recommendations. Now there's 3 action areas, and each one has a series of recommendations. Again, I'm not going to go through each and every one. Action area 1 is to elevate the status of science education. And this has to be done starting from the White House with leadership from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, that has been contacted by the National Academy. There's been several meetings since the call went out. And the call is to raise the profile of science education. Congress should also include science as an indicator of academic achievement in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that's going to be renewed this year. At this point, it's only ELA and math. And finally, within this area is to have state departments of education include science in their accountability systems. Now, maybe Jessica will talk a little bit about the dashboard here in California and what's going on with that. but it's critical to include science as something accountable for all districts. Action area 2 is to establish local and regional alliances, and my colleague will definitely talk about this, is to form alliances for STEM opportunity and develop evidence-based plans, very concrete plans to improve STEM education that is funded federally and by local agencies. And California is one of the first states to take positive steps in the formation of such an alliance. And then third, and finally, action area 3 is to document progress towards equitable science education. And what it's called the STEM opportunity maps that document and track where opportunities are available, where there are disparities, and progress made towards eliminating the disparities. And at the national level, there's a call for the federal government to develop an annual STEM opportunity in the states. It's a report card for the states around the status of science education. So these are the recommendations that have been put out there for the states to take on through their local regional organizations. And this is what is moving us towards a vision for better and more equitable science education. I think I'll give you a second to read that. I think this vision really encompasses really what science is and how it can better our world. And it's this notion of students experiencing joy, beauty and power of science, what science can do for them, for their own understanding of the world problems, and how they can solve them. And it's so critical that they feel welcome and valued, that their funds of knowledge that they bring into the classroom is welcomed and valued. And we have a unique opportunity in this nation today, in this world today, to change things, to reset science education so it's better, more equitable for each and every one of us. So then the question is, what is California doing to make this a reality, to bring this vision to fluidity? That's what we'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudio, for those words of wisdom. And we will have a chance to do a little bit of some questions and some discussion after we hear from all of our presenters, and just those themes of opportunity, joy, sense of belonging. This is where we all together are able to make a real difference. And so I'm excited to now hear from Jessica about what's happening at the state level on this front. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Claudio, for providing such a great background. I could listen to you talk about it all day. My name is Jessica Sawko, and I serve as the statewide director for the California STEM Network, which is a project of Children Now. And I would just like to start off by wishing a happy anniversary to CRS. I'm thrilled that you are celebrating and bringing us here together today. And just knowing that there are organizations like yours fighting the fight every day is wonderful. And I wish you another 25 years and more. So really quickly, I want to talk to you about the California STEM Network. It is a statewide network of approximately 11 affiliated regional STEM networks and ecosystems across the state of California. It's been in existence for a number of years and nowhere near 25. but at least 10. And we are essentially one of the main voices at the state level representing science and STEM education. We work all day, every day to advance STEM education policy through advocacy with the governor's office, legislature, State Board of Education, Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and any other state level entity in which we feel like we can gain traction in order to support STEM in California. We definitely believe strongly in partnership, recognizing that not only science is a collaborative endeavor, right? And much like science being a collaborative endeavor, we recognize that supporting science, high quality science education for all kids also needs to be a collaborative endeavor. And that thus all of our regional networks and ecosystems really try to leverage the resources that are available in their areas in order to promote science and STEM education. And as a network, of course, we always like to try and share our best practices and bring together the statewide leaders in order to have conversations around what's working well in their regions, activities in their regions, et cetera, to support STEM. Here's a quick map of where we are in the state. We are essentially from the border with Mexico all the way up to Shasta, not quite to the border with Oregon. We have a number in the Central Valley. We have a nice congregation here in the Bay Area, and then all along the coast. In terms of priorities, we work with our network every year to identify priorities, and our statewide priorities haven't actually varied a whole lot in the last few years, which I guess just sort of goes to say that while we have made progress, we have not made nearly enough. And so we are continuing to advocate, particularly in the areas of early math and science, to Claudio's point, recognizing that we need to start early and we need to be intentional and prioritize math and science learning in the early grades. The diversification, recruitment, preparation, support, and retention of STEM teachers. We cannot have science without teachers in our classrooms. And it's not only a problem that's existed since the pandemic, but also prior to the pandemic. And so it's a chronic one that we've been addressing for a number of years. Working to get science on the California state school dashboard. So the dashboard is the state's accountability system in terms of its public facing component. It provides information to the public to let you know how your school or district is doing in everything from language arts and math to college and career readiness, chronic absence, suspension, progress of English learners. But one thing it doesn't tell you is how kids are doing in science. And so we've been trying to change that for a number of years, and there have been some good commitments made at that level, but we are still not there yet. And so we continue to elevate that as an issue. And in addition, we are also focused on college readiness for STEM, particularly to the aim to diversify the STEM enrollments in undergraduate programs. And I'm not going to go too much into our strategic partnerships other than to talk about the one that we have been engaged with because it's directly related to the blueprint for K-12 science education, which is the California Partnership for Math Science Education. That group, along with the Exploratorium and others who care deeply and have been engaged heavily in professional learning around the next generation science standards, responded to the call to action that was issued at the national level by convening a group of folks in science education to develop what has become the blueprint for action for equitable K-12 science education in California. And we really view this as, what we need to help move the state forward. It includes not only priority areas, but action recommendations at both state and local levels. So it's quite a useful document. And I know I gave CRS the link so they can post that in the chat so you can have access to it. What really drove the blueprint was recognizing that we really need to see systemic change in order to make this happen. We need to identify, and we identified 5 priorities in order to do that. And those priorities include the one I've already mentioned, science on the dashboard. It includes investing and strengthening local education agencies, or LEAs, capacity in order to offer high quality science education. We need sustained and ongoing investments in science, and we need to teach science through culturally responsive and sustaining strategies and materials, all in alignment with the call to action. We see the same needs here at the state level. And finally, fostering a science teacher and administrator workforce that is representative and supportive of student identities. And we chose those words very carefully, recognizing that no individual is a single thing, and there are multiple identities that we carry, and we wanted to make sure we honor all the things that diversity means. And so to that end, there have been efforts underway at the state level in order to implement aspects of the blueprint. I've talked about state board, but that piece around professional learning and building capacity at the district level is the one I want to talk about next within the context of the state budget. You may have seen some headlines, things about gas rebates and lots of money in California as far as the state level. And what that essentially all translates down to is that increased state revenue means a lot of money for Proposition 98, which is the fund that we use to fund our schools. And so for every dollar that we bring in state revenue, 40 cents goes to schools right now because of the conditions that we're in financially as a state. The Legislative Analyst's Office is predicting that we're going to have $14 billion for last year, like the 21-22 year, the year we're in now, $14 billion more than schools have already gotten, right? The governor is expected to release his proposed May budget revision on Friday at 10. We should get a better, much clearer picture of where the state's headed in terms of its budget. There's a number of constitutional restraints that are on the budget right now that are making investments difficult for non-Prop 98. So if you're in health or welfare or anything that's not K-14 education, even higher ed is at risk of losing some funding because of the situation with the budget. But you are going to see a great deal of investments in infrastructure. So even like school deferred maintenance, new schools, and I'm going to be telling you to advocate for science labs in your elementary schools and building schools that can accommodate a high quality science education. So if you're going to be involved in expanding your school or district's infrastructure, please, please, please make sure you put science in the forefront. The one big question that is really out there, and we heard reference to school districts sort of being chronically underfunded or not being able to afford instructional materials. Some of that has to do with the great uncertainty and the way the budget cycle works for districts. If they had known they were going to get $14 billion more, which is what we know today, back in, June or July of last year, they may have been able to budget a little differently, right? But they didn't know that. They know that now. And so it's a little bit hard for a district to fully decide. And the other piece is we don't know how the governor is going to choose to allocate the funds. Is he going to give it to LCFF, which means school districts get to decide how to invest those funds? Or is he going to create a categorical program? Last year, he chose to create something like 15 categoricals that require 15 different plans for school districts. And so with this coming year, we have been here. I know they've been hearing a lot about the pandemic, excessive plans at districts, and how strapped everyone is. And so we're expecting to see an increase in the LCFF base in addition to the 6.6% statutory COLA that is going to be there. We're going to be looking at an increase in the LCFF base. That's my prediction. And it's also what the Senate proposed in its priorities last week. And relative to implementing the blueprint, California Association of Science Educators, the Exploratorium, and the Education Trust West, in combination with other supporters like California STEM Network and Children Now and CRS and others, have been advocating in support of a budget ask by Assembly Member Blanca Rubio. of $388 million over 3 years for math and science educator professional development. Those funds would be broken if approved, and in the budget, we'll find out. Those funds will lead to $62 million to the California Partnership for Math Science Education to continue their work in supporting science and math educator professional learning and grow out that community of practice. 165 million to school districts who would be participating in that community practice, pays for travel, et cetera, meals, all kinds of things. And another 161 million over 3 years for professional development in order to build capacity in order at the local level to implement the new math framework, which should be adopted in July, as well as the science framework that was adopted a number of years ago, as Claudio said. And with that, that is all I have to share really on the state budget. And we will know more, some on Friday, and even more a few days later or weeks later when they actually issue what they call trail of bills, which is the details of the budget. So I'll keep you updated, Teresa.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And we gave you an impossible task. We said you have about 10 minutes, explain everything about state funding and about the blueprint, and wow, you did it. Any of you who don't follow education funding very closely can see that it's very complex and also so bizarre. I'm sorry, I just have to say bizarre the way we fund education, particularly at the national and state level, where you've probably also seen all kinds of stories about our school district slashing budgets, issuing pink slips for teachers, and then we'll be in that cycle of trying to backfill positions again as we prepare to reopen classrooms again in the fall. And so that brings us to our reality check and our conversation with Paulette Smith here. We are very fortunate to have joining us. And during the middle of a busy principal's school day, I am so appreciative of you being here with us today, Paulette. And I wanted to first give you a chance to just respond to kind of what you heard Claudio and Jessica share about, and what's that view of how science is supported at all or able to happen at your school. We know Claudio shared about the new next generation science standards, which were adopted 8 years ago, and we're still calling them new in California, and lots of school districts haven't done much teacher training or adopted materials. So yeah, what is it like for you on the ground as a school leader to kind of make science happen? And do you feel supported, or how is science supported for you?
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I've been a long time partner with CRS, and I was on the CRS board at one time. And so I'm very committed to what CRS is doing for schools across our area, Bay Area. And I have also worked very, very closely with Claudio and at Oakland Unified School District. And in fact, that's where I learned the value and the importance of science as a classroom teacher. I was a science teacher lead and participated in all the professional development that Claudio and others created for teachers. That was really powerful. And I haven't seen it replicated in any other district that I've worked at, not in Tracy Unified, Stockton Unified, and now I'm here in San Leandro Unified School District. So I've been an administrator for, I guess, about almost 10 years now. And I'm currently here at James Madison Elementary School, and I participate on the California State University East Bay Institute for STEM Ed, and their partnership with school districts in Hayward and San Leandro, Oakland, around the area, and trying to figure out just what we're talking about today is how to get science into schools, how to make it meaningful, what is a plan. And of course, I'm sharing what I learned from Claudio, right? I'm sharing we need science teacher leads in our school. We need to have the district say, these are the instructional minutes that we expect every classroom to teach. We need to have a curriculum. We need to value science as a district. And so with a little bit of influence that I have, I actually got teacher leaders into our schools this year. Now, we have to build on that. It's just the beginning, and it's nowhere near what Oakland was doing at the time, but it's a start. And we also have adopted Amplify as our curriculum, but we also still have all of our FOSS materials. So as the principal, I have the opportunity of having the vision for a school, right? And my job is to get everybody on board with that vision and expectation. And so, trying to get the materials into the hands of the teachers and get them to open up the materials and teach a lesson. And I've even done it so that I can do formal observations of them teaching science. So they're interested in teaching it, and I'm interested in being in the classroom to see the joy of learning science hands-on. Also, we put together our first makerspace, and that's an opportunity for teachers. They don't have to do anything, but the kids get to go in and tinker and explore and build and decompose their building, whatever they're building, and learn from each other without. So what we had to do is we got the teachers in there to tinker first. And then once they saw how easy it was to navigate this space of both high tech and low tech materials, then they were like more willing to bring their classes in. And we had a tremendous number across the school, K-5, of students coming into the makerspace this year for the first time. And the kids are loving it, and they're co-droning, and they're they're creating. So that's one part of it. The other part was the garden. Our garden was defunct, and in fact, they wanted us to decommission it, whatever that means, right? And I said, no way. And so now we've got our garden going, and kids are out there, and they're learning about you can do science in the garden. And I did that with a growing learning community over at UC Berkeley as a teacher, where they were teaching us about science in the garden and math in the garden. So, yep. And so these things you do, but once you get the ball rolling, then you see evidence of it. And as a school leader, my job is to go in, wow, I love the vocabulary on the wall. Wow, send me your pictures of what you're doing in your classroom. And so the science becomes alive at your school community because that's what you value. The problem, okay, so there's that.
Well, you rolled all of my questions for you into one awesome response. And I just want to take a moment to say that you are just encapsulated the work that we've been doing for 25 years to support an educator. When you give an educator an opportunity to learn something, to try something, to have some science visitors come in, it just ignites a passion and it ignites a comfort. And you can hear that coming through as you talk about all of the science that you're bringing to life, from classroom science and curriculum to tinkering to gardens. And that is just so powerful. And I want to really, because I'm being mindful of time, I want to just ask Eric to put our slides back up and just connect in with what you just shared and with what Jessica shared and what Claudio shared. But before I start, I want to just give you one chance to also say, I think you hinted at it, but one of the things that a lot of teachers and administrators struggle with is science looks messy and noisy. And when you mentioned coming in and observing, and teachers can be a little intimidated. It looks like their class is maybe noisy or almost even like, out of control or something when really good science learning is coming on. But when we come and do science in classrooms, or our visitors come, we have a day of science, we hear over and over again, oh, the behavior problems have gone away. The kids are so engaged. So I just wanted to ask you, just like, in a sense or two, like, what do you see when kids are doing science at your school?
Absolutely. So, I have to say, my school has a really great group of teachers. And so I definitely am not one of, I want to see everybody with the same book on the same page at the same time doing the same worksheet. I want it to be loud and messy and making mistakes and learning from each other, and the engagement piece. It's not about the teacher, it's really about the student learning. And I try often to push that student discourse, the opportunity to ask a second follow-up question, as Claudio taught us, the ability to show your work and show your thinking. And so I'm walking around classes all over my campus. I have 600 students here, and I'm only principal. So I'm always in the classrooms watching the students and engaging with them learning. And it's really brilliant. It's just beautiful. And I want to say two things. One, BASIS is a program that's offered through CRS. And that has been a game changer because you're connecting graduate students in their field to the everyday student in the classroom, and the students are getting to see, well, how did they become a graduate in biology, learning about that particular area of yeast, for example. And so they get to tell the kids like what they were interested in school and making those connections for them. And that right there is that college readiness. And then I will just say the other thing is our school is really moving toward computer science. We have 4 teachers going to the California Computer Science Project at Cal State East Bay, including myself. So that's a nice team of people who are doing this on their own to learn about how we can integrate computer science into the sciences, because that's another component that's really missing across the school districts.
That's such an awesome encapsulation. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that goes to what all 3 of our presenters were speaking about today, which is building capacity. And that's what we have the ability to do together. So Eric, if you can advance the slide. And it's all about connections, connecting scientists, connecting teachers, connecting students. And those of you who are on the call today, I noticed some of you putting some great resources into the chat. We will be sharing all of that out. So if you have ideas, thoughts, questions that you want to be sure that we capture, please feel free to add those to the chat. We will be assembling this information and sharing it out with those who are here today with us live, as well as who are waiting to see the recording and the follow-up information. And I want to just share and kind of maybe tie together a little bit with our last few minutes. And thank you all the presenters. We got a lot of questions in advance of what people wanted to hear and learn about, and you covered it, almost all of it. So magically, thank you so much for just incredible information you shared with us. And I just wanted to show the picture. This picture kind of shows what our last 2 years have kind of been like. Lots of Zoom virtual lessons into classrooms, lots of Zoom professional development with teachers. But over on the left, our middle school mentoring program was back fully in person this year, just on Monday, and Eric helped run our first back in person all-day science festival at a school. So go ahead, Eric, to the next slide, please. And so that's what we do. The things that you heard Claudio and Jessica and Paulette share about, that's what we are here to do at CRS, to coach teachers, to connect teachers, to support teachers. And we hope we get back to these lovely in-person summer institutes again soon. But that's really the core of really doing this work, is supporting teachers. And Eric, if you can go to the next slide. And getting scientists. And Paulette mentioned the passion of our BASIS scientists from UC Berkeley, and also from many of the STEM industry companies. And many of you are on this call here today. This was a team from Health Advances. They were at a school in Oakland all day yesterday, Monday, sharing science with kids outdoors, doing catapults and DNA extraction and observational sketching, and just being that role model, bringing that message of you belong, bringing that message of diversity and equity, and that you have a place in science and in the science industry, in the science community, whether you go into a career as being a bench researcher or an engineer, or somebody who likes to do communications. You might be working for a company that gets to tell the story about how their medicines are helping people stay healthy and well. So lots of that connection to kids' own interests. And that's what's so important. The companies and the university students who participate in our outreach, it really has a lasting impact. And Eric, if you can go to the next slide. And we just want to thank, and I know many of you are on the call here today, but thanking those partners who really devote their time, their employee engagement, their sponsorship. We have a lot of them here. And Eric, there's one more slide with some more. And we're so fortunate to have all of you joining with us. And so I think there's one more slide, Eric. You can go to the next one. I just recap. That's just a recap of what I just said. So I think it gets us back to this joy that we are all bringing into kids' lives. We want to help transform the school system. We want to transform the infrastructure at the state and national level. But these kids have one time to be fourth graders, and they have one time to learn as fourth graders. And we want to make sure that year is a great and meaningful, important year. And the same for kids throughout the K-8, K-12 systems.